On today's show, I'm answering your woodworking questions. We also have Jerill Vance here from the Appalachian Heritage Woodshop, and I'm telling you what I got going on in my shop. All that and more on this episode of After Hours Woodworking. Hello folks, I'm your host Chad Stanton, and so I'm going to start this off telling you what I'm doing in my shop. So the other week, I think it was last week, I started making this bench. Now, this bench was given to me from a customer. They found it on Pinterest, and they said, hey, can you make that for us? And of course, mine is slightly different in size because of what they wanted. They wanted shorter, they wanted a little bit taller. They didn't want the back of it coming up to the top of the table. So I had to take all those things, and then I had to figure out like the scale to make that work off of mine. So here's what I'm at so far with it. So I have the back all done. It's all mortise and tenon together. The tenons, I got tenons that go through the seat. They go into that upper rail. All the individual little rails in there are mortised into it. So pretty fun project. Really liking how this is looking. I got the legs done, and what I've been working really hard at is the splay and rake angles on the bench. Now, I can't tell that from the original photo because of the perspective of the camera and so on. I have no idea what the splay and rake is. So I've had to do some mock-ups of it. Now, essentially, what you have is when you're looking at the front of a chair and the legs angle out, well, that's the splay. If you're looking at the side of the chair and the legs angle out, that's the rake. So if you're drilling that hole, you have to accommodate that. Now, that sounds like that shouldn't be too hard. Well, you actually deal with 4 angles when you're drilling a seat leg like that. You have the splay angle, the rake angle, the resultant angle, which is a combination of those first 2 together, and then you need your sight line angle to actually drill through. So with all 4 of those angles, there is a bit of math involved. Now, I am doing a video on the build of this bench. It's going to be one of those fast build ones. However, I am going to stop and do a special video just on figuring out those 4 angles: splay, rake, resultant, and sightline. Okay, the other thing I got going in the shop this week is initially I wasn't going to put this much effort into it. I've got a customer. She's been waiting for a while for me to rebuild the barn doors on her shed. Nothing fancy. In fact, here's a photo of the original ones. They're here in the shop. And as you can see, they're just falling apart. You know, it's carpentry built work. It's just butt jointed together, all nailed in. And, you know, for the purpose that it does, it's fine. That work is totally adequate. The problem with me, though, is I always see an opportunity to make something better. And so I decided to construct them a little bit more heavy duty. The stiles on it are going to be half-lapped to it. And, of course, the X on it, well, that, too, is half-lapped together. So it's going to be quite solid in the end. But this actually, I thought, was a great example to share with you, because I know a lot of people will build projects that have like this X in it. And it's not a 45-degree angle there. So I did, again, this is going to be a fast build video, but I'm also doing just a small segment on it to show you how to figure out these angles. And then especially if you want to do a half lap on this cross, the angles there gets a little bit more confusing. So I take the time to show you guys how to do that. So that'll be a future upcoming video as well. Okay, so that is what I've got going in the shop this week. I don't even want to start a third project at this point. So let's move on to some viewer emails. So the first question comes from Brad Solchin. Brad wrote me and said that he bought a new table saw. He's very anxious to use it. And of course, right from the manufacturing, they put like an oil on the top to prevent it from rusting. And he knows he's got to clean that off. You can't keep that on there. But he was curious what to put on the saw to keep it from rusting and to make it easier to slide boards across. And so what I use is I like to use this Johnson's furniture paste wax. I put that on the tabletop. I do mine about once a month. Also too, I put a little bit of it down in the what do you call that? The miter gauge tracks to keep that moving smooth. You put it on, let it film over, and then just buff it off. It does a great job. Now, I know some folks will say, oh, Chad, well then, that's going on to the wood when you're pushing it across, and then when you go to stain and finish it, you could have problems with the stain and finish. I imagine that's possible, but I don't go right from the table saw to staining and finishing. I've got planing and card scraping and sanding and all that somewhere in between. So I don't worry about that wax getting into the wood. Someone else told me they use a spray dry silicone. You spray it on the table. Once it dries, it's super slick, and they say that won't affect the wood. I've never tried that, but I've heard several people tell me that. So at any rate, Brad, that's what you can use to help keep the top from rusting and to help them slide. And I use that same wax actually on my hand tools as well. Now I will say, I just thought of it. Let me see if I got it here in the shop. Hang on a second. Okay, I have not used this on tools, although I was told it could be. I bought this in a kit, this T9. I got this, and it came with a couple other items. It was like a 3-pack from Woodcraft. Mostly I bought this for bearings on my routers, for my bandsaw, down on the table. So I use this for the bearings because it goes on wet, and then when it dries, it still leaves this lubricant on it that gets into the bearing. It's supposed to be good. And I imagine you could probably rub this on a rag and then coat your tools with it as well to keep them from rusting, because it does say rust and corrosion protection. So that's another item you can use. But like I said, I've been using this. This one can of wax has been lasting me. It's got to be over 8 years. So. Okay, next question comes from John Marensik. And John sent a photo in on Monday. He was making he called it a rustic style cabinet. He made it out of some number 2 pine. And he was commissioned to do the work. And he's now getting obsessed with, because he gave a price for it, and he's been tracking his hours, and he's getting obsessed with the amount of hours that he's putting into it. He's like, I'm not making anything. He asked me how to work faster. Okay, I've run into this with myself personally many years ago. And what I had to do was give a price to the customer that's fair for them and is fair for me, that I would be happy making that amount of money. And then from there, I stopped keeping track of my hours. Because what was happening was I was so obsessed with the hours and so obsessed with trying to work faster, I would push myself to work faster, and it was suffering in the work. So then I was either doing something over again twice a step, or maybe I would try to tell myself, oh, just let it go, and that would bother my conscience. So what I found is just don't keep track of the hours. Just do the best you can and be satisfied that you're giving them a high-quality piece of work at a good price, and just leave it at that. Now, I know that kind of seems funny because people are like, well, Chad, if you're not keeping track of your hours, how can you bill for the future jobs? And that's true. So what I've come to find is under ideal conditions, how long does it take me to do certain steps? Like how long does it take me to do a drawer? How long does it take me to do a drawer, a door? Certain things I've done enough, either for others or for myself, that I kind of can gauge that. So then I can look at a project and go, okay, I think I'm going to have this much time in getting material, this much time in preparing the material, this much time on the build, and then this much time on sanding and finishing. And in my experience, the sanding and finishing can take as much or more time than the build. So in some cases, I try and help my customers and have them save some money. If they want to do the staining and finishing, I give them that option. But 9 times out of 10, they just have me do it. So it just takes a little bit of time and experience there, John, and I think you'll start to work better at pricing your work. If you're interested, I've got some links below in the description on some blogs and some other videos I've done in the past that talk some more on this subject. But the most important thing is don't ever sacrifice your quality work, which is also your name and reputation at that point. Don't ever compromise that just to save a couple of pennies. Okay, next question comes from Karen Corrigan. And Karen is fairly new to woodworking. I believe she's up there in Alaska. And she came across some older Time Life series books on woodworking. And she says, it features the router so much in these books. She said, I had no idea that a router was absolutely necessary for woodworking. It's like the most used tool in that book. And she asked me if that is. Keep in mind, most woodworkers kind of gravitate towards a particular tool and favorite more than others. In my case, I love the table saw. I can do so much on my table saw. Dennis, if he had his choice of only one power tool, he would lean and gravitate towards a bandsaw. And then I know others that feel the router is the go-to do-all power tool for them. So I would say many times in these books and in articles, the author or the woodworker is maybe be a little bit biased towards his preferred tool and does it that way. And that's fine. That's fine. That's totally fine. You know, there's all kinds of ways of doing woodworking with your tools. I mean, you can do a rabbet and a dado on a table saw just like you can with a router. So if you can add a router to your collection, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. And if you're wondering how to maybe do a particular step and all you have is a table saw, go ahead and write me, Karen, and I'll see if we can't get that step figured out for you. Okay, that should get the email questions for this week out of the way. And now I am happy to move on to our guest appearance of Jerill Vance. Jerill is over there at the Appalachian Heritage Woodshop. He's got a TV show that has actually come out this month, on PBS down there. And so he's going to be doing a little segment going forward here for us called This Old Tool. And each little segment, he's going to spotlight a different tool and tell us a little bit about it, maybe a little history behind it. So let's see right now what Jerill has to show us.
Thanks, Chad. This is Jerill Vance with Appalachian Heritage Woodshop. Today I'm at Heritage Farm Museum and Village here in Wayne County, West Virginia. And I'm wanting to show you some braces, as in braces and bits. And I'd like to start with this very, very old one right here. If you notice, it is all wood. It doesn't have any moving parts to it. These, because of the way the grain is, these are reinforced with metal. and it has an unusual push button release here to release the bit. We also have some nice ones back here on the wall. We have a corner brace, and we have an all metal brace with a thumb screw instead of a chuck. And then we also have a breast brace. I'd like to go over some of the parts of a brace with you. This is the cap or the head. This is the bow, the upper bow. This is the handle or the swing handle, the lower bow. And then you have the chuck. Now this chuck is different than a Jacob's chuck like on a drill press or a battery powered drill. It has two jaws in it, which are alligator jaws, and in the middle of each of those jaws is a V groove. And those are designed to grab a hold of a brace. You have the tang, the shaft, the twist, the cutters, and then the point down here. And this tang is what it grabs a hold of. A 3-point Jacob's chuck will not hold one of these. The other thing I wanted to show you, some have a ratchet system on it. And I recommend that if you get one for your shop, you get one with a ratchet system. So you need to make sure the ratchet works properly. Always go 360 degrees to make sure all the gears work properly. This will allow you to drill in a confined space. And then, of course, you can also reverse it. And then in the middle is neutral, so it goes both directions. So when you look for one of these, you want to make sure the cap or the head will rotate and does not have any up and down play. You want to make sure the handle or the swing handle will rotate and does not have any up and down play. I've already talked to you about what to look for in the ratchet. You need to make sure the jaws work properly and the spring is in there on the alligator jaws. The other thing I wanted to show you was the proper way to insert a bit. Most people do not insert the bit the proper way. So what you do is you take the bit and put the tang in there and you tighten it by hand just enough to hold it. Then you turn it upright where gravity pulls down on it, and I give it a little shake and then tighten it the rest of the way by hand. If you install the bit while it's upside down, it will fall down onto the spring, and then when you tighten it can damage the spring. So now you've seen all the parts. Now it's just a question of which size is right for you. So you need to look at the swing. The swing is the distance from the handle when it swings 360 degrees. So the distance from the center line here to the center line here is called a swing. Most manufacturers made these from a 6 to a 12-inch swing. Now you're wondering why is there different sizes. It has to do with the torque. The bigger the bit, the more torque you need, so the more swing you need. If you have a very small hole you're drilling, or if you have a screwdriver bit in here where you're using it to drive screws with, then you would want a short swing and a small amount of torque. So I advise you to go look at flea markets, garage sales, yard sales, estate sales. See if you can find some of these old ones. You know what to look for. You can get these for about $20 to $25. And I'll let Chad tell you why these are so much better than a battery-powered brace. Thanks, Chad.
Jerill, thank you so much for taking the time out and doing that little segment for us. It was very interesting. I know myself and the viewers will probably really appreciate it. And we look forward to more segments with you. And of course, we look forward to your show being a huge success. So, yeah, why is it a good reason to have a brace in your tool collection? Well, I'm just going to start off by saying that they're really, really affordable. I mean, you can pick these up at just about any garage sale, flea market for just mere bucks. You probably have an uncle or a grandfather that has one in his shop that he doesn't want to use anymore. So that's the first thing. They're easy to get. But why have one, right? You're thinking, Chad, I mean, the cordless drill. Well, that's the way to go now. That's what I want. Okay, without a doubt, my cordless drill is something that I use every day. But there's still a reason for these braces. For one thing, the brace is a lot more lightweight than the cordless drill. Between the motor and the battery on this, you already are at a disadvantage. Like if you're trying to drill a specific hole in a location and coming out on the other side in a good spot, you naturally are going to have gravity working against you and wanting to pull this. With the brace, it's a lot lighter, okay? And I can easily sight line down this to get the hole going. They really excel at making small holes. If you want a very precise small hole, it works great for that versus the heavy power drill on it. Seriously, I find many times on the small holes, I'll get them way off just because of the offset of the weight of the balance of the drill. The other thing too is the auger bits on these, which will not fit in a regular drill. The auger bits on these, as Jerill pointed out, have the threads, and they start off like a screw on it. So once you get it into that wood, it's now pulling itself through. And so what that is doing is it's helping you make a more straight hole going through it. It's a little bit more accurate because as it's pulling, it's limiting your ability to get off track versus the bit here. As you see, it just comes to a point, and I can manipulate that a lot easier than the auger bit. The last reason that I find them really handy to have is with the brace and bits versus the drill or versus any power tool that you have. When you're dealing with hand tools, you can tend to see your mistake as it's happening. Versus with a power drill or power tool, you notice your mistake after it happened. So if you're recognizing that maybe it's getting off track, you can correct it a lot easier without damage versus a power tool. Once you make that mistake, it's too late. All right. A little tip I want to give you on using the brace and bit. Many people, when they will drill with it, will either use their chest here or they'll use their forehead. And the forehead, they can sight line down it, or they'll use their chest and shoulder. What I find too is if I mount a piece, if I can, instead of always working down on it, I can take my board, put it upright, and I put my body weight leaning against it this way. And so I'm pushing forward on it, and this allows me to see very accurately if I'm side to side. It's a little tougher up and down, but I definitely can see from side to side real easy on this. And again, using my body weight, it makes drilling quite easy. So if you get a chance, pick one up and put it in your collection and see how often you actually use it. You might find that you're going to it more often than you might realize. Okay, that should wrap it up for today's episode. If you have any woodworking questions, feel free to write me at woodshoppingtime@gmail.com, and I will answer them and get them back to you to make you a better woodworker. And if you liked that segment that Jerill did, go ahead and leave some comments below if you would, because I'm looking to add different experts in their field to the show to make it more knowledgeable for all of us. You know, last week we had David Shepard from Crystal Lac. He will be back. We'll have Jerill Vance back as well, if you all enjoy it. And I've actually reached out to Rick Frazier, who is an expert at CNC machines. And this is a field I know nothing about. Honestly, it's a field I don't care to know about. But because of that, I feel I should be educated. I don't think I have the right mindset to say I don't like something, especially when I don't know anything about it. So Rick is going to be doing little segments for us starting in January to introduce us to CNC machines and answer some questions for us. So if you have any questions out there, or if you have an old tool and kind of wondering what it is, send a picture of it in to me. I'll get it to Jerill and see if we can't figure out what it is and what it was used for. As always, I thank you so much for watching the show. And come on, you know what I'm going to say. Keep on dancing.